Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Japanese Politics 101 room. Every Sunday, Timothy Langley, who runs a company in Tokyo that focuses exclusively on Japanese politics, government and public affairs, and host Pai Matsuoka, bring to you the latest developments in Japanese politics. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions and opinions, so if you haven't done so yet, join us next time. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region.
Good morning, everyone. Let me begin my briefing. I'll try and keep my comments as brief as possible. That's awful hard to do sometimes because there's so much to talk about. But maybe 25 or 30 minutes to brief you and then open the room. If you have questions, please reach out to Maya privately via the messaging application. So today we're going to talk about Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine, because it does impact what's going on with the Japanese foreign ministry, and also just geopolitically, what's going on in Ukraine has an impact in what's going on with Taiwan, what's going on with North Korea, what's going on with the northern straits, the northern territories, that sort of thing. We're going to talk about the Kishida administration. There's a lot of movement there. The Diet has been in session now for almost 6 weeks. The prime minister and his cabinet continually get grilled. They get asked tough questions. They're asked why they're doing things with the National Security Agency, the push to bolster a COVID response, push out the boosters. There's a lot going on there, and I'm going to report on that. He's got a lot of things going on. Not all of them are very good. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Okinawa. There has been, as there always is, a little bit of movement there that's an indicator of what you can expect in the near term. And so it's important to keep your eye on what's going on in Okinawa. The Tokyo metropolitan government is always a key feature. You know, many people say that the most powerful political figure in Japan is the prime minister. I think that's true. The second most could possibly be somebody in his cabinet, but just as likely it could be the Tokyo metropolitan governor, Governor Koike. And that's because the Tokyo metropolitan area is so huge and so much an engine for the entire nation. About 1/3 of the entire population lives in and around Tokyo, so it's massive, and the economic power of Tokyo alone is greater than many of the countries that surround Japan. So it's very important, and her policies, her visions for the future are very important. They carry messages for us to be prepared, or to maybe put resources into anticipating that. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what's going on in the LDP. There's been some movement there. The LDP has censured 5 former prime ministers in a very rare move for disinformation, for rumor mongering, for trying to cast dispersions on Japan. So that's a pretty big deal. There's also been some movement on individuals joining different factions. So as we've talked about in the past, there are 6 major factions that comprise the LDP. The LDP is a political party, but it's divided into factions. Each of those factions is almost potentially its own political party, except they've amalgamated themselves, and in order to produce the maximum political power, they stay tight. And so there's infighting between the political factions, and Mr. Kishida doesn't like to be the second smallest since he's the prime minister. And there is movement there that is continuing, and that numbers are growing, and people are beginning to align their forces and change parties, or to join different political factions. So there's always a lot of interesting news there, stuff that you don't normally hear about, but I'll try and make it brief and interesting and integrated in a way that makes real good sense for the audience, and also opens us up for questions and a little bit more exploration, Maya. So let's talk about Ukraine. So I'm just going to go through these 6 issues that I've identified to you. I'll go through them as in a reasonable pace, get through them as quickly as possible so that we can get to the room. What's going on in Ukraine is truly alarming. Over the last 48 hours, many countries have ordered their embassy staff to evacuate from the embassies. New Zealand, England, the United States, Japan. Japan has said for Japanese nationals in Ukraine to depart. That's a very big deal. Japan, there are many countries that have manufacturing facilities in Ukraine. It's a huge country. It's centrally located. There's a lot of manufacturing going on there. And to have, these countries insist that the diplomats evacuate is really a big deal. Sometimes it's an understandable precaution, but to also, initiate an evacuation for nationals of your country too is a huge deal. So keep your eye on that. There's a lot going on there. Japan's stance and Japan's reaction to that has implications for what's going on here in Southeast Asia, particularly with regard to, the Russia's unsettled dispute with the four islands, the Northern Territories, and also the coalition building that they're having with the Chinese government, as evidenced by the flotilla that sailed through the straits, and just a show of force, a show of collaboration between China and Russia. It's a pretty big deal. It's unique. It hasn't happened in recent history. So for them to sail a flotilla through Japanese waters is pretty remarkable. That's not something that happened just now. It happened several months ago, but that coalition building continues, and it is not pretty. But similarly, Japan, the United States, the Quad, many, even England and France, are also having collaborative exercises, naval exercises, as a show of force to China. But this is also severely impacted by what's going on in Ukraine. We had not predicted so much energy being devoted during the Beijing Olympics. They're in full swing now. But it does look like, if you, depending on what news source you're following, it does look like there is movement afoot right now, and so there's a lot of nervousness there. North Korea has fired several rockets in the last 2 months, since January. 7 or 8 they have fired, and now the North Korean leader has decided that he's going to schedule a massive military field day, a march, to generate the energy of the population, maybe a little bit of saber rattling. I think we can anticipate that there is going to be a little bit more action on that end. I understand that the Chinese are not completely supportive of his actions. He has kind of gone off the handle on several instances. He's not, following Beijing's script perfectly. He's got his own agenda. But he has slowed down, I think, as a consequence of the Olympics. But indicators are that it will restart in full swing very aggressively. You've got the Olympics, and then you've got the Paralympics after that. So we've got another month and a half of Olympic television, Olympic things going on. One idea was that nothing would happen during that because of respect and deference to Beijing, but it looks like things are kind of leaking out. Also, you might have heard that President of the United States, Joe Biden, did have a conference call with President Putin yesterday. They talked about Ukraine. The storyline is that Putin was wagging his finger and saying, you shouldn't do that, don't do that, there will be consequences for doing that. And I think Mr. Putin just played coy and said, we're not doing anything, you're the ones that are saber rattling, we're the ones that are threatened. NATO is encroaching on us, and we don't want Ukraine to fall under the umbrella of NATO, and you guys are the ones that are pushing it. So that controversy continues. It remains to be seen actually how they will resolve that, but I think it is coming to a point. I'd like to move on to Mr. Kishida. There's a lot to talk about in Japanese politics with Mr. Kishida, so let me get right to that. The United States lifted trade barriers for metals. This has been an ongoing concern ever since President Trump, to make America first. Don't take advantage of our trade policies. Pay your fair share of hosting the military, the U.S. military, all of these things that President Trump was known for, and many people point to as damaging the international relations of the United States. So the Biden administration is backing off from that. They have released trade barriers in precious metals and steel, some of the things that were under consideration with the Trans-Pacific Partnership idea that was stopped under the Trump administration. It has continued in several different variations, two of which, the Chinese want to have a seat at the table too. The United States has withdrawn, but is contemplating being a member of that. But with what's going on with Taiwan, the saber rattling, the aggressive overflights, that trade partnership, those discussions have pretty much cooled for a lot of different reasons. But in any event, this is good news, and also it's a follow-up to another announcement that the administration made, the Biden administration made, of the president coming to Japan in mid-May. So that's on the books now. It has been announced. It will be a summit for Quad. So Australia, India, Japan, and the United States will come here. The thinking is that it might include a trip to South Korea as well. South Korea is a huge participant and a factor in what's going on in this region. It's unfortunate that Japan and South Korea don't have better, warmer relations, but they're in the middle of a presidential election, and the new president will be elected in April and then sworn in on May 10th, and that's right around the time that the Quad will be here in Tokyo. So it looks like there might not be a presidential visit to South Korea, but in any event, there's a lot going on between now and then. I think the Quad will meet here in Tokyo, but it just might be a trip to Tokyo and then back to Washington, D.C. But we're very much looking forward to that, and those details will be more solidified as we go forward. The LDP has let me see, the policy division of the LDP has censured five former prime ministers for spreading what they interpret as rumor and fake news. This is something that's rather shocking for the LDP to do that. It does indicate a realignment of what's going on in Japanese politics. Mr. Kishida attempting to establish himself and to separate himself from his predecessors, in particular Mr. Abe, Mr. Suga to a less degree, but these five former prime ministers, this is really something. So the five that they have identified for censure are Junichiro Koizumi, Naoto Kan, Morihiro Hosokawa, Yukio Hatoyama, Tomichi Murayama. These five are, I think every prime minister in Japan is prominent, but these names all resonate. And the criticism that they have are that they are fostering a groundless discrimination and prejudice against Japan by sending to the EU a letter that was signed by all of them on the triple disaster, the nuclear reactor explosion in 2011, and the consequence of cancer in children in particular. And the administration takes great umbrage at that, saying that it's not based by the facts, and it's kind of inflammatory. It's discriminatory against Japan. Japan and South Korea, only just now has South Korea lifted the embargo on foods coming from Japan as a consequence of that. So the relations are moving forward in some areas, and that's one indicator. But this censure will now go to the floor for a vote this next week. It is headed by and spearheaded by Takaichi Sanai, who was one of the candidates for prime minister and lost as prime minister. She was supported by Prime Minister Abe, but as a consequence became probably number 2 in the LDP administration. That is within the structure of the LDP party, which is different from the cabinet. So she is a very powerful contender. And the issue here is kind of a criticism against Tokyo Electric Power Company and their number 1 nuclear reactor that exploded. And it casts actually dispersions on, continuing dispersions on the nuclear energy, which I think the Japanese government has realized if they're going to be decarbonizing the economy here, they actually have to have nuclear to do that. It might not be the same kind of nuclear reactor as was in the Daiichi nuclear reactor, but if they want to go carbon neutral by the aggressive deadline already committed to, they need to do something drastically different. But they still need to do it with nuclear. Nuclear will always be a component. So this is an issue that is going to mature in this next week. You should keep an eye on it. You probably haven't heard much about it, but you will be hearing more about it in this next week. The other thing that is going on is the Prime Minister has decided to reduce foreign entry restrictions. This is a huge deal for trade and investment and also tourism. Tourism is a little bit farther afield. It'll probably happen in, this is Maya's area of specialization, but I'm beginning to think maybe towards summer. The burning issue now, and there have been protests in major capitals of the world at Japanese embassies for the restrictions that are being applied for educators, for students, for workers who have been hired. So many countries or companies are withdrawing, their growth issues because they can't send the executives and their families here to Japan who have been kind of on standby for the last 2 years. More hurtful in the long term because Japan projects, its soft power by bringing in students, having them learn about, Japanese politics, economy, culture, returning to their countries, and then kind of proliferating that experience that they had here. It's a form of diplomacy. Other countries do that as well. Japanese nationals go to other capital cities. They learn the language. They learn how business is done there. They come back here. They work in companies, and this kind of homogenization of culture and business. That's a piece of it. Since Japan has been so restrictive, more restrictive than most countries, many of these people who have been motivated to study Japan, to come to Japan, to teach or to get a degree of some sort, have been in hiatus for 2 years. They're giving it up. So you can understand and anticipate that in the near future, you're not going to have that bevy of people who have studied Japanese and who are familiar with the country and the culture, who go back, they finish another degree, they work in industry, they become lawyers or whatever, and then that cross-fertilization continues. That has been stymied, and we're going to see the impact of that, because once COVID goes away, there will be a resurgence on Japanese business, on tourism, on bilateral trade with lots of different countries, but there's going to be a bit of a gap there. So the people who are already here, are familiar with the country, who live here, will have a distinct advantage. There's going to be a gap that needs to be covered up. Mr. Kishida understands that, and he is addressing that. I think you can expect to have some pronouncements this next week, because last week was pretty active on that. And he's stated his determination to address that issue, even in light of the fact that some of the numbers are not going down as they are in other countries. The mask mandates pretty much, it's not a formal mandate, but you can't really be in Japan or walk the city or work in a company without being masked. Just socially, people will begin to shun you. But yes, in Tokyo, you are required to have a mask, and restaurants would insist that you put them on. But many countries are stepping away from that. Japan is not yet, and I think it'll only be a matter of time before they do, and that indicates the end of COVID for us and maybe a return to normal. There's another big burning issue, the economic security legislation. So when Mr. Kishida became prime minister, he set up a new minister of economic security. He appointed a young fellow who is coming up through the ranks to be that minister. And the legislation is being prepared now to be submitted to the Diet. So as you might recall, the same process was followed by Mr. Suga in the establishment of the digital agency around this time last year. Mr. Suga became prime minister after Mr. Abe at late 2020. In 2021, he submitted legislation, and in very quick fashion, the digital agency was established in February, March. It actually was established. The legislation was in February, March, very quick. And then the agency took off in, I believe, September or October. This is the same pattern that Mr. Kishida is following for the economic security legislation. It is in line with suggestions, I wouldn't say demands, suggestions by the United States in shoring up this frontal assault to address, what's going on in China, the blockage of the supply chain, the shortage of chips and condensers, and all of the things that go into production that are not all manufactured here. Japan needs to bring it closer to home, and the United States is doing the same thing. You're seeing a lot of effort and a lot of money being spent on bringing chip manufacturers into Japan, not homegrown ones. This is foreign chip manufacturers who have a competitive advantage. So that is going pace. The issue with economic security kind of hit the news this last week. The director of legislative policy, legal policy, who is drafting the legislation, was identified by Bunshun. Bunshun is a kind of a scandal magazine, but it's one of the necessary pieces of understanding what's going on in Japanese politics because it is so opaque and difficult to understand. Bunshun and other kind of magazines like that, Bungei, report on what's going on. They dig up dirt. They make some sort of scandalous claims. But in any event, they do have a big impact on Japanese politics. And I predicted, it wasn't any genius of mine, but the Kishida administration, it's had its 100 days. The honeymoon is over. It's kind of down to brass tacks now. And the Diet is in session, so he's on the block every day. And stories will come out, enemies will get footholds, and he will begin to get attacked by people who want what he has established or to diminish him. And that's not just the opposition parties who are lining up for the upper house election in about 5 months, but it's also his own party, people in his own party who have different political factions wanting to keep him down, wanting to diminish him so that they can return to power or maybe assume power as a consequence of his missteps. And you can't really discuss or understand Japanese politics outside of the role of scandal in Japanese politics. So that's what's coming up now. There are a couple of issues that are coming up, kind of scandalous. The censure of these 5 former prime ministers, I think, is a pretty big deal, and it kind of signals, it telegraphs certain things about freedom of speech and how the party who is not the party in power feels about the political party or the political faction that is in power. So there's all these machinations that are going on. But Bungei followed this fellow around and identified him as having a side gig, teaching on the side on Saturdays to a kind of a study group where people join the study group. They pay 5.5 million yen a year for this weekly briefing, and they get briefings from different kinds of people, like this director of the legislation going into the Diet now. And apparently he didn't report the money that he was getting. He was accosted by the reporter and secretly followed. It cast some doubt on credibility with Mr. Kishida. He resigned, but not before the story became a little bit more juicy by the report that he was, he had a relationship with a Asahi newspaper reporter at the same time. And the reason why this is a big deal is because frequently Asahi has scooped all of the other reporters on reporting on what is going on with the legislation, what kind of penalties are being considered, how the legislation is going to work, how the Japanese government is going to be able to initiate such a broad sweep of oversight for business and companies purchasing land, how Japan is going to be able to protect itself economically in light of, and this unstated goal is this is all to protect Japan from China incursions, from Chinese theft of Japanese IP, for having real estate purchases that are close to sensitive areas. A lot of different things going on to that. So this is now a big issue in Nagatacho, that this fellow was caught having a side gig that he didn't report with economic security legislation as his job. He should have known better. He should have been more ethical about that. And also then, as a consequence of the investigation done by these reporters, the fact that he's sleeping with the Asahi newspaper reporter and being scooped as a consequence of that, it's caused a bit of a scandal. There's going to be more of that sort of thing. The enemies of Mr. Kishida are, well-funded. They're ensconced. They have their own issues, and with the upper house election approaching, you will see more and more of that. It's just a matter of Japanese politics moving forward. Speaking of scandal, there was always a suggestion of gangsters being married to members of parliament. Seiko Noda is a very prominent politician. She also was considered as a runner for prime minister. She is very prominent in LDP politics. She's a favorite of Mr. Abe's as well. And it was suggested while she was running and her prominence was growing that she was actually, her husband is a member of the Yakuza. And this created great controversy. They sued the magazine that reported that. One of the magazines that I was just talking about, the Scandal Rags, they sued them for $11 million for slander and defamation. And the result of the court came out just last week, and the report was pretty devastating for her that, in fact, he was a member of the criminal syndicate, and her prominence in LDP politics. It is suggestive of other things that you don't want to ascribe to how Japanese politics moves. So her role is a bit under question, even though she was prominent and very powerful. But once again, you see these little chinks in the armor being attacked, being addressed, being brought to the fore. And it's not done by the normal press. It's done by these investigative reporters hired by these rags. So you might see a little bit more coming up from that piece of news. But also, it doesn't stop there. There is another prominent female member of the parliament, Katayama Satsuki. She's very prominent, very popular. It turns out that she is going to run in the upper house election in Tokyo. The election facilitation is run by a fellow who is in the Abe faction, who has pretty much dictated that this particular seat that she's going to run in needs to be from an Abe candidate. And since she wants to have that position, she's in the Nikkei faction now. The Nikkei faction is probably number 5 or number 6 of the factions. It is losing strength. Mr. Nikkei is kind of on the downswing as a consequence of Mr. Kishida becoming prime minister. He was always on the downswing anyway, even when Mr. Suga was prime minister. There was a lot of motion going on there to diminish him so that Mr. Suga could establish his prominence and succeed himself. That didn't quite work. And Mr. Kishida became prime minister. So she's going to lead the Nikkei faction. Nikkei faction and Kishida faction were neck and neck at around 43 members. And currently, I think the standing now is Mr. Kishida's faction has 45, and Mr. Nikkei's is continuing to diminish. And the movement of Ms. Katayama is very closely watched. It has impact on Tokyo government politics as well, but also on the Abe administration or the Abe faction, which is by far the largest faction. And you've got the other factions kind of coalescing, not against it, but to be more strongly defensive against, Mr. Abe and his just the lingering afterglow of him being a prime minister for so long and being so prominent in foreign affairs. So there is a movement going on there to continue that diminishment. It's also interesting to note that the Children's Family Agency and the Minister for Declining Birth Rate, that was a big issue in the Abe administration as he was trying to prop up his standing to show his kinder, gentler face. That's usually the role that's provided by Komeito, their coalition partner. That fell on kind of deaf ears after the election and has not made a whole lot of progress, although it has been under a lot of scrutiny for what you pronounce and what you actually do. Are you going to follow up with that? It's something to watch. The social structure, the social safety net provided by children, by families, by declining birth rate. It's a huge issue here. I don't know if they've got enough resources or determination to handle that, but it's an issue that we need to watch because in the light of the declining birth rate and the kind of the demographic pyramid that is a part of Japan, the only way that Japan can really maintain their productivity levels is by bringing in more foreign workers, high-skilled workers, laborers, and that sort of thing. And the scorecard is not very good in this area as well. So it's a big issue to watch as Japan's position with regard to productivity compared to South Korea or even Taiwan is diminishing. It is an alarming bell for policymakers here. I'd like to move on to Okinawa. So Okinawa is almost always a topic in our briefings because it's so prominent in terms of hosting, the United States military presence. It hosts, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. The Marine base there is the largest in the Pacific. It occupies all of Futenma. And there is a movement to take all of these Marines and the training facilities out of Futenma and put them someplace else. So this has been going on for 10 or 15 years. There was movement to move some of the not immediately necessary structures to Guam. That has happened, but still there is a presence that is required to be based in Okinawa. They're moving that to Nago, to Henoko, a place that they are dumping land onto, a spit of the island to create land to host the Marine forces. The current controversy now is that apparently the Ospreys are going through a lot of training in Naha, the capital city of Okinawa. And this has raised a lot of concern among the Japanese, the Okinawan population there. They're Japanese, obviously, but there is a huge distinction that the Japanese, or that the Okinawans like to highlight, that there's just a lot of animosity between Okinawa and the central government. And once again, this claim that the training is disruptive, it is alarming, it's upsetting to the people who live there. Why does it need to be in the capital city? Are falling on deaf ears. Okinawa also hosts OIST, the research and university facility that was created about 12 years ago. It is really a great facility for higher level education and also research. The development and the research funding was provided by the central government for the first 10 years. That 10 years has now come up, and so they're going through their own refunding. But since they are in Okinawa, and since it benefits Okinawa to a great degree, I mean, it is internationally famous, the institute there, that the money is not coming from the central government as, once again, a poke in the eye, since Okinawa is not kowtowing to Tokyo's demands on hosting the military, on being more conducive or facilitating to Tokyo's likes, the prime minister's likes. And with the governor coming up for re-election in August, this is going to become a hot button issue. So it's just one of those things. When you see Okinawa in the news, please keep an eye out for it, because it is a buildup. You'll have the upper house elections in July, and then the governor's election in August. These are all interrelated, so just keep an eye on that. And I think with that, I would like to wrap up today. Did we have anything else? The only other thing that bears mention is Governor Koike, Tokyo Governor Koike, has gone on the record for promoting Japan as a financial hub. This story has gone around and around over and over again, but it's taking on new prominence as Korea is beginning to go into shutdown mode. The financial analysts and the people who support Hong Kong as being a financial hub, a very attractive financial hub, are beginning to leave because of the COVID restrictions. They are among the most stringent in the world, and I think it's done by design. And people are leaving the island or the province for better pastures. Many of them are going to Singapore, which is the alternative. They're not going to Taiwan. And the other alternative is Tokyo, except Tokyo doesn't have the structure. It's not as welcoming. It doesn't have the language facility that Singapore does. It doesn't have the international schools, or it has tax disincentives and that sort of thing. But her going on the record and saying that she wants to make this as the investment hub, she is pronounced to be the next stage of growth for Tokyo. That makes a lot of sense to me. After they've gone through the Olympics are in the rearview mirror. COVID soon will be in the rearview mirror. What's the next thing for Tokyo? It's a huge city. It is a generator of tremendous wealth. It can set its mind to do a lot of different things. What is it going to do? She has identified it as to be the financial hub, which encourages other things too, to make Japan, perhaps even a 24-hour city. That I think that would help accommodate some of her wishes. Recently, during the election of Prime Minister, it was remarked that she would make a good Prime Minister, and is she going to run for Prime Minister? I think that's all history now. I think she is up to her ears in running Tokyo. And like I said, it's probably the second most powerful political position in Japan, next to the Prime Minister. I think she's going to stay in her position, and I think she's going to dedicate herself to making Tokyo a much more vibrant city. The only other thing that somewhat impacts that are the legislation for casinos in Japan. That was a big issue before COVID. We almost had some bidding that was going to be selected. Some cities there. It looks like that is now becoming a little bit more of an issue that perhaps Wakayama would be considered as the first casino. I think it's inevitable that Japan will embrace casinos as an engine for more economic development and more foreign trade and travel. But we're just on the cusp of dealing with COVID, and I think the real vibrant treatment of the casino legislation and selecting those sites will be right around the corner. Probably in summer, you'll see a lot of action there. With that, I'd like to close this briefing. I hope it's been interesting and insightful for you. I'm sure there are other people who have other takes on it, or maybe some more relevant insight, or maybe you just got some questions on issues we haven't touched. I've gone on a little bit long, Maya, I apologize, but let's open the floor and see who else we have on the show for us. Thank you.
You mentioned that the economic security of Mr. Kishida, so this is his flagship, let's say the flagship
That's
policy, right? So, well, actually, I hear that he and his cabinet, or let's say the people he has appointed to do that, are working on the legislature at the moment. And it is, well, basically they are working on strengthening the supply chain and research and development public partnerships, also non-disclosure of patents and reinforcement of infrastructure. So these are all great points to work on and actually to create a bill which regulates them. But there is so very little in the news about this, and I wonder why such details are not disclosed, because they are all good policies, right?
I think the reason is because it's kind of the same reason with the digital agency. So the digital agency was launched, and all we heard about was faxes and hankos and my number. You didn't hear a whole lot about what was going on. And we've reported, consistently on the digital agency here in this briefing, that it does take a while to get all of the kinks worked out. And the reason for the digital agency is because it is so intrusive into how the various ministries run their email, how they access information, how they analyze, how they store information. It needs to all become integrated so that the all-seeing eye of the Prime Minister's office can see without having hearings, without, they can do investigations and have the information right at their fingertips when everything is integrated and it's all digital. So there's a lot of war and a lot of battle going on within the various ministries because they don't want to share. They've never had to share. They've had their own fiefdoms. They have their own ways of encrypting their intelligence, and that needs to go away. And it's just very hard. So that's why the prediction is that there will be some movement that the public will see for the digital agency in rolling out for the second year, the third year, but you're not going to see real dynamic, dramatic change from that agency until maybe year 5 or 6. Similarly, with the economic security legislation, it is intrusive. It is very deep, and so they don't want to upset people. That's why, this scoop from the Asahi newspaper reporter was so big. Even though she was reporting on just penalties that will be imposed for people who violate the proposed legislation that is coming up, for example, on patents or on leaking information or on not having the right kind of security. Just talking about what kind of penalties are going to be imposed, because sometimes it's worth the risk if the penalties are not that great, but the benefit from having a successful violation far surpasses, then, it's sometimes a good business decision to go ahead and violate the laws that are on the books. So even at that level, Asahi was scooping the other newspapers, and it did indicate a little bit of a leak going on. But I think the reason it's taken so long and why it's so quiet is because it is so intrusive.
Well, it leads me to the next question, actually, about Miss Koike.
Yes.
Right. So you just mentioned that she has begun promoting Tokyo and Japan as an investment hub after Hong Kong. And of course, you made a parallel between Singapore and Hong Kong and Japan. And you said that, which is also true, of course, that Japan doesn't have the the legislative base to accept so many foreigners and to be the investment hub of Asia. Also, that the infrastructure is not there yet. But still, she began just recently to promote the country. as a hub. So I wonder whether these 2 points will come together at the end of the day. I mean, let's say the economic security legislation, also the digital agency, the border openings, and what Ms. Koike envisages for Tokyo and Japan in the future. Basically, these are not only 2 points, they are 4 points. And I wonder how long we have to wait for that to happen too.
I think it does make a certain amount of sense. Being a financial hub is not necessarily creating or enhancing a carbon footprint. It is basically a relatively clean industry. It's all intelligence and number crunching and being the brains for financial transactions, that sort of thing. So that does make a certain amount of sense to me for her to focus on that as an emerging industry, and also although not falling directly into her bailiwick, but cryptocurrency and dealing with financial payments and digital payments. That's another big issue that I think Japan needs to address, and it needs to be at the forefront of that. There are many things that Japan wants to be involved in and be at the forefront of. For example, crypto, cybersecurity, that sort of thing. They want to be the vanguard. It's just that there are so many other countries that have a competitive advantage because they've been involved in it for so much longer. They've been dealing with these issues. So, for example, it comes out in many very funny ways. But, for example, Mizuho Bank, you'll know that you'll remember we reported on, the failures, the technical failures that Mizuho has had over the last couple of years, 11, if you count them, for a failure of the cash cards or the cash dispensing machine or a leak of information. So they've been attacked many times. Some people say it's due to a cyber attack, but their policy, their internal policy is to use what's created here in Japan, and as a consequence of that, they haven't gone to what's best in the field. They've limited themselves to having Japan-based technology embedded in how they deal with banking transactions, that sort of thing. And it seems like they've been caught with their pants down way too many times. So they've been censured. They're in a lot of trouble now. But I think you see that with a lot of industries, a lot of companies. And the challenge for Ms. Koike is not only that kind of philosophy, but also, the foreigners are not going to come to Japan if, for example, living in Japan means that even after they leave Japan and they might die, that Japan inheritance rules reach out and capture part of their wealth merely due to the fact that they lived in Japan for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. So already there's a bit of a disadvantage for foreigners to come to Japan. They stay beyond their 5-year term. Then they get hit with the tax impact. So they leave. People who are really starting to come up to speed in their 5th year, they leave Japan and only come to Japan for 100 days throughout the year. That's what the limitation is. You can come in as a tourist or as a non-resident, but you have to break that residency in order to escape the tax impact. And that really hurts. We see diplomats that come into Japan all the time. They're here on a 2-year, 3-year or 4-year stint. And the first year, they're just becoming comfortable with the other people that are in their particular embassy. They're learning the ropes. They're learning more about the city. The second year, they're becoming a little bit more fruitful. Their third year, now they're actually generating value. You can meet with them. You can have really valid discussions with them. You can move the football a little bit. And then the next year, they're gone. And you have to come in with a new breed of diplomat. But in the business world, that also happens. Can you imagine being here for 5 years? You're really starting to kick over stones and be effective. You've already suffered a lot of the damages that one normally gets, inelegantly firing people or on, spending money inappropriately, that sort of thing. Your 5th year, you're really starting to make your mettle, and now you need to be rotated to someplace else because of the tax disadvantages that are imposed. Those sort of things. Tokyo has a say in it, but these are all dictated by the national government. So some people like Tokyo the way it is. Some people want it to change. So there's that fight too.
Yes, I can see that. And it's another fascinating point that there is very little talk about the taxation of foreign, short-term residents and how big a detriment it is, for making the country an investment hub and...
or repatriating the profits that you generate.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't...
Yes.
Yes. Well, But I also got, a couple of questions via the back channel. So the first one is about China.
I think the entire audience is also terrified of you too. So they always feed you their questions. They don't come up on stage. Gosh.
Yeah, because well, I have nothing to say to that. It's true,
Yeah.
obviously.
It must be because of that photo that you've posted up on Clubhouse.
On Clubhouse, yes, indeed. But let me read the first question, okay?
Okay.
So recently, the US, Japan, and Europe, also other countries, intend to set up new export control policies to strengthen the science and technology siege on China. What do you think will be the policies of the US, Japan, and Europe on China's science and technology siege? This is a difficult question, I think.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think, a wall is being built between China and the China realm, which is being established through lots of techniques. It's been going on for a long time. Belt and Road is one of them, where you have the countries who are aligned with or receiving money from or the benefit of being aligned with China, and those who are not. And China is huge. It's not something that you can just dismiss out of hand. It is Japan's largest trading partner. It's not going away. But this tension that has been created over the recent more aggressive tactics with regard to Taiwan, I think it's because of internal Chinese politics, and a lot of just the wealth that China has been able to generate, being the manufacturing hub for all of the advanced countries, so that they can offshore the manufacturing and then focus more on the services. I think, yes, that siege, as it is characterized, will continue, and yeah, it's hard to speculate, but I can envision that there will be two kind of worlds that exist with different technologies and different ways of encryption, or having VHS televisions or beta televisions. That kind of dichotomy will come up, and I think people are the Chinese have for a long time taken advantage of the intellectual property regime that nationally they don't have to observe. Other countries don't have to purchase the products that are produced that embed technology that is not paid for under internationally recognized intellectual property rules. But that's the purchaser's choice, and they've made a lot of money off of that. But I think you'll see a lot of trade barriers going up, a lot of walls, a lot of restrictions, and with the advent of digitization and the ability for central governments to more carefully manage and monitor their own economies, I think that will come into a much clearer focus. The Chinese too are making great advances on those sort of things in terms of, like, for example, facial recognition and big data, that sort of thing. So they're motivated to dominate their economy and spreading out to the states that support them with sharing of technology, but also capturing that technology when they can. It's a little bit of an off topic conversation, but one of the things that the athletes who were going to Beijing were warned about was this application that you must put on your phone, so that the Chinese government can monitor you for COVID adherence and making sure that you're in the right place at the right time, and the hidden ability to capture information that is being generated while you're using that phone or using that application. So this technology is growing by leaps. It's far more advanced than people know about, and that's why you can get away with some of these things. But I think you're going to see far more of that in the near future, especially if there is some sort of a confrontation. I think that wall, that kind of siege, the word was used by the questioner, a siege mentality. I think that very definitely that is a prospect that.
Dr. Nagy, Stephen Nagy, he also comments on this, and he says that all the agreements and alliances here in the Indo-Pacific, they aim at establishing, let's say, regulations for free and open Indo-Pacific. And those regulations are designed in a way to actually create legislation which allows countries, of course, including China, to follow them. of course, and to adhere to them so that there are no violations. Of course, it's difficult, I believe, because in the case of China, when the domestic policies and external policies there are quite different, and what China can do on its own soil, it cannot do outside. So obviously, the European Union has now revised its legislation for private information, disclosing private information, and the use of private information by private companies. So there is a conflict there at the moment between Meta and the European Commission. And this conflict, of course, at the moment it is a conflict, but it shows you the way or the direction in which the governments are moving. The governments around the world are moving. So first of all, they don't allow private companies to use the data in a way to let's say to allow them to make profits, to sell the private information of the users. And of course, this will be probably much more much stronger, when it comes to let's say China and other countries, probably Russia as well, because that's how things are. Actually, they say that the next world leaders, they will be not those who are military, the strongest in military terms, but the strongest in terms of technology and data handling. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point made by Dr. Nagy. Always when he makes a comment like that, there's a kernel there, but it's surrounded by so many other things that just because of time and space, we don't talk so much about. But he has a room. You host a room for him twice a month. I think he spoke this last Monday, so this Monday is his week off, and then he speaks next Monday. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So his room is about geopolitics. He gets right into it. But with regard to his comment about rules-based diplomacy, that is one of the real strengths of Japan. Japan is in a unique position to play that kind of role, to be the kind of arbiter of creating rules and managing rules and getting people all together to decide those. It kind of goes without saying that the rules that are based and created by one faction of this party is not going to be acceptable to the other side. So China likes to have rules when they benefit from them, but not when they don't benefit from them. They ignore them. It's like the economic zones that exceed the landmass of different countries. They have a different interpretation of what that zone is, that exclusive economic zone. And other people can decide that it's wider or smaller, but unless everybody agrees and follows that, you're going to have controversy, and I think we're going to have controversy. And in this rules-based, the ambassador to Japan, the U.S. ambassador Rahm Emanuel, was speaking on this just this last week. And actually, we didn't talk about it in this briefing, but he is really starting to exercise his muscles, to meet with members of the cabinet, to be more prominent and more vocal about issues of importance to the United States and supportive of the U.S.-Japan alliance. But with regard to rulemaking, I think this is one area that the Japanese can excel at. They could be identified as a leader, as a spokesperson for this, because they have a unique position in the world. They have a peace constitution, at least currently they have a peace constitution, and they stand as the number 2, number 3 economy in the world, based on free trade, free exchange of information, having a democracy. So there's plenty for the Japanese to do, I think, diplomatically and geopolitically. I think that the opportunities are going to come up once we come out of COVID. I think it's going to be a very vibrant environment, and you need to continue to stay tuned to programs like this and Dr. Nagy's too, because there's a lot going on. Maya?
We have also a comment via the back channel once again that some people say that Kuala Lumpur will actually be the next financial hub, investment hub here in Asia after Hong Kong.
Yep.
So, but I really wonder whether all the regulations are in place there too, because we know that Japan actually is based. Everything which is done in Japan is based on law and rules and so on. But at the same time, Japan likes the infrastructure. Maybe it's the opposite case with Kuala Lumpur. I don't know if somebody in the audience has has more knowledge about this, please join us and let us know. In the meantime, Mayuko, thank you for coming up.
Good morning.
It's
Hi,
been a
Good
long
Denise.
morning.
time.
I know it's been a long time. Thank you for having me. Good to
Oh,
see
thank you for
you.
coming.
Yeah. So my question is, and I wasn't here from the beginning, so maybe you might have already talked about this, but my question is on the U.S. Secretary of State's visit to Fiji and all these other countries there, and I understand that, especially Fiji, I understand that it's something very rare, the first time in 36 or 7 years, and also the U.S. reopening embassy on Solomon Islands. My question is that, is this just a part of the efforts to counter the Chinese influence and strengthen the Asia-Pacific relations, or is there more to it? I guess the timing, why now? What was so urgent that he had to pay a visit to Fiji in the middle of the pandemic? Is it because of what's happening in Ukraine? Because I feel like we need to look at what's going on in the U.S. or elsewhere in the world that's impacting the U.S. When we look at these decisions. And I was wondering if it shows the desperation of the Biden administration because his approval rating really doesn't look too great, I think. So that's my question.
Thank you. I think this issue it falls more into Dr. Nagy's bailiwick.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's right.
No, no.
Maybe you could talk about the implications for Japan, or from or maybe the history of Japan, Micronesia, Polynesia relations,
Mhm.
perhaps. Yeah.
Well, the thing with the Chinese investing in port facilities and bridges, they've done a massive job in the Philippines. It is part of their strategy to gather friends and to make investments. And with investments come commitments and sharing of information and laborers and technology. And they have been very, very aggressive on the island nations of the world, not just here in the Asia Pacific, but all over the world, building new ports when fishing ports, communication centers, things like that. They've done a massive job, not just on continental countries like Kenya or Uganda. These massive building projects that they've invested in. It's part of their Belt and Road strategy. But I think with regard to Micronesia and the countries in the Asia Pacific who are island countries, it's because they have a vote. They have a vote in the United Nations, and sometimes votes are taken. It's somewhat a democratic vote, so numbers mean a lot, and frequently there have been votes that have been cast that have nothing to do with Micronesia or with even islands in the Caribbean, voting in support of Chinese proposals that diminish, will actually strengthen their position at the detriment of the United States or Japan or other countries. So there is a huge strategy going on now. I think it's probably the Blinken visit is catch up. They should have been doing this for a while, but the way American politics is, you have an administration for 4 years. It can be repeated for another 4 years, and then they move on. With the Trump administration, it was 4 years, and then that was cut. So and the policies, the direction, the philosophy changed so drastically that, yeah, I think probably it just takes time. The Chinese don't have that kind of problem. So I think it's just, yeah, it's not panic mode, but I think it's, hurry up and catch up because we haven't been too friendly with these people in the first place. And initially, there was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was, gaining a lot of speed over a 6-year period. And before it was launched, it was just, the United States walked away from it. So, yeah, there's some, rebuilding of alliances that goes on there. And in that absence, the Chinese coming in with money for bridges or for infrastructure, it's very attractive.
I guess the Japanese the minister, Mr. Hayashi, is also there, right? He's also, didn't he go and visit?
I don't know if he joined him in Fuji. I don't have that information.
Oh, maybe not Fiji, but maybe I think Australia or something. So you think this is just a regular kind of visit, a part of it?
No, I think
much needed.
No, I think
They're just catching up.
There's definitely a scramble. There's a lot of catching up. The current foreign minister, he's exercising his abilities as foreign minister. I think he will be a great foreign minister, by the way.
Okay.
And
Well,
yeah, he needs to get
what
out.
makes him what makes him so different, in your opinion? In your view?
Well, I think because he comes from the Kishida administration, he is, I don't know if you would say best friends, but you would
Mm-hmm.
anticipate he's number two in the Kishida faction. And so
Right.
those two are bound at the hip. So you always want your spokesman to have that. I don't know if Mr. Biden and Mr. Blinken have that kind of relationship, but I know that Mr. Kishida and Mr. Hayashi do have that. And
Right.
so you can promote and propel your initiatives, much more effectively in that kind of scenario. And I think they're going for the long haul. Mr. Kishida is aligning his forces so that he does well in the upper house election, and then he succeeds himself. So he's got another term as prime minister, which means that Mr. Hayashi has another term as foreign minister. First of all, he has to win his seat in the lower house election. If in fact they've gerrymandered it so that he has to run against Mr. Abe, I mean that's going to be a huge fight. One of them, it looks like one of them will have to give up their seat if they don't do something different, which is another topic of conversation. But the gerrymandering, the rules will be established in June, and then we'll have the upper house election, and who knows when we'll have a lower house election. But the decisions that are made in June will be implemented in the next lower house election. And whether there are 4 seats or 3 seats, it's musical chairs. When the music stops, one of the chairs is removed. Somebody's got to give that up, and that's going to be a tough fight.
So I guess it helps that Mr. Hayashi is a rock star, right?
He is a rock star. I've been to several of his concerts. He's a very
Really?
effective. Oh yes, he's a
Wow.
very effective guitarist. He's
Amazing.
a lead man, a lead singer. He's got charisma. He's got dynamism. He's
Wow.
funny on stage. Yeah, he's great.
Okay.
And he's smart. He went to Harvard. He went to the Harvard
Right.
School of International Policy, International
Mm-hmm.
Affairs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayuko-san. Long time no see. Thank
Yeah,
you.
long time no see.
Right. Yeah, just as always, a great insight, Timothy.
Thank
And
you, Ray.
thank you. And very tough questions that speak for all of us, Maya. Thank you. We appreciate that. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a pleasure.
So I don't mean to add more salt into the injuries, Timothy, but I do have one question that I wonder if you could share your thoughts about that music chair example you mentioned. We understand I think we understand the process, June and time frame and things like that. But how exactly do they decide how the rule should be defined? That is something I don't think many people know. Is it
No.
done in a secret way?
Yeah.
Or do you have any insight that you can share with us publicly?
Yeah. This is a great question, and it is a little bit deep. So I think some people just get drowsy when you start talking about it. But first of all, the Supreme Court has said that the election districts where there is an outflow of people, they're going to the major cities. They're going to Kyoto, Osaka, Nagoya, Tokyo. This is a trend that has been going on for a long time. And the prefectures who have been assigned 2 or 3 members of the lower house, maybe 2 members of the upper house per prefecture, the numbers are disproportionate for the people who are living in the cities. So you might have 5 members in a large city for the lower house, but over a period of 5 or 8 years, the numbers have increased so that every person's vote is diminished proportionately. And the value of the vote for the person in the rural areas has increased. So they're trying to make a redistribution by taking, let's say, for example, in the district where the Mr. Abe comes from, and where also the foreign minister Hayashi come from, they have 4 members of the lower house that are assigned there. And because of the declining population, they're going to remove one of those seats, and they're going to move that to one of the more populated places. So it's not, it's just the seat itself will be reassigned. So perhaps in Tokyo, they will receive another 2 seats or 3 seats, actually. So there are a couple of districts that are in a state of unconstitutionality that decision was reached several years ago, and as a consequence of that, the parliament has been ordered to do redistricting, and that's the issue that we're talking about now. So in some districts, it will be reduced by one member of parliament and redistributed to Osaka or Tokyo. And the issue is when they make this decision in June, who makes that decision? And I think it's a parliamentary democracy, so it will have to be done within the lower house and then submitted as a bill to the upper house. The complicating fact here is that the largest faction in the LDP is currently the Abe faction. It has 98 members, almost twice as large as the next faction. And the Abe faction used to be held by Mr. Hosoda. And Mr. Hosoda is now the Speaker of the House. He's the Speaker of the lower house. And the vast number, the people who are going to be affected by that kind of change of a reduction of a seat and then the inclusion of another seat, the faction that is most largely impacted by that is the Abe faction, the Hosoda faction. And Mr. Hosoda has come out and said, maybe it's a little bit too early to make this decision about redistricting. Let's push it down the road for a couple of years. And he shouldn't say that as the Speaker of the House. He's not in the Abe faction anymore. He's not the head of that faction anymore. But politics being as it is, it does create a little bit of concern there. So how they decide that, it will be a political decision, but a lot will come out in the wash. You'll see, the horse trading that goes on among the various LDP factions on how they're going to be able to protect themselves. And the opposition party is going to have a field day on that because they're going to say the Supreme Court said that. It's funny, the words that the Supreme Court said is they didn't say it's unconstitutional. The vote proportion is unconstitutional. It's disproportionate. So change it. They just said it's in a state of unconstitutionality, which is a wiggle word. Why didn't they say it? So it's a very delicate issue. It could be decided. It looks likely to be decided in June. I predict that it will be kicked down the road and they will dangle something out like, let's kick down the road for a couple of years and increase the numbers. Let's reduce the numbers in those areas and increase the numbers in the major cities to account for the influx of populations. But let's not decide it now because it's just too disruptive. It's a huge issue, Ren. I'm glad that you identified it. It's a little bit complicated, but it is also fraught with internal politics. So there's a little bit of, it's like, everybody loves to eat the sausage, but you don't like to see how it's made. This is one of those issues.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, even though I read Japanese, when I'm reading the Japanese newspaper, I still don't understand very well.
Yeah.
And it is interesting that I understand much better with your English explanation. And I find it to be kind of sarcastic, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And the other thing is about the Kuala Lumpur. That was my question through the back channel to Maya. And it is really not a pure Kuala Lumpur question. It is the real meaning of that question was that among my friends, my colleagues, we believe the city that can really use English is a mandatory requirement for the next financial center that would take over what Hong Kong's position was. And if you think about the cities that really speak English frequently, of course Singapore, but we are talking about another city paired with Singapore, right? Then what we really have is either Kuala Lumpur or Manila. But if you look at the, I just want to share this with you if this is interesting to everyone. There's something called Global Financial Centers Index 30, I believe. The last published one was September 2021 last year. And Kuala Lumpur is the top financial center in Asia that speaks English. Of course, there are other cities that are ahead of Kuala Lumpur, such as Shanghai and even Busan is a few ranking above Kuala Lumpur, and of course Tokyo and Seoul. But if you try to find an English-speaking city in Asia, Kuala Lumpur comes the first. I think it was ranked like number 48 or something like that. So the question to you is, have you heard that Kuala Lumpur is has the highest potential to be the next financial center, as my friends have been telling me? And do you think English, to be able to speak English, and the infrastructure to be able to accept foreigners to live comfortably, tax policy-wise as well, is an important part, and Kuala Lumpur deserves the attention. And I'm not working for the Malaysian government, by the way, just to be clear. But that was my question.
Congratulations. So we talk about the attractiveness and the benefits. You can't do an evaluation in that kind of a vacuum. You also have to talk about the negatives. So when people mention Manila, it almost just falls by the wayside. Who wants to go to Manila? I mean, it's in a kind of a danger zone there. The United States completely abandoned the Philippines, 25, 30 years ago. I think that that the Philippines is not a contender. Similarly with Malaysia, they have the largest Muslim population in Asia. That is a bit of a concern for some people. But also they had some tremendous riots there, you'll recall, where it was just pandemonium and anarchy, and a lot of people were killed, and it chased a lot of international businesses away from Kuala Lumpur. It is a beautiful city. The food is great. The people are really gentle and nice, in spite of the riots that they had there. But I think that history goes a long way. When you compare that to Tokyo, it is the number 3 economy in the world. It should be a financial center, and the reason it's not, we've already identified. It's the lack of English fluency, which is so strange because students have been studying English, for 50, 60 years, and still it's hard. There's also, an unsettling trend among Japanese university students who don't want to travel internationally. They don't want to go overseas for a postgraduate degree or for an undergraduate degree. It's very pronounced among males, not so much among females, but that trend of going overseas and learning a second language and adopting to a second, it used to be such a hot, big issue 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and that has died down a bit. I think the Japanese kids have learned that if you want to advance in life in Japan, you need to be really good at, the attributes here that make Japanese businessmen, really successful and really prominent. And you're not getting benefits. You're not getting Benny points from going to another country and being out of the loop with your colleagues. The colleagues are the ones, that's where the competition is. Similarly with law firms, if you want to be a partner, you belong to a law firm in England or the United States, and they send you to Japan. It's not such a great career move because you're out of the center of where the gravity is. Even if you're sent to Japan, you're representing the law firm, for example. You're picking up deals, you're doing deals, but the decisions on who becomes partner, that's made at the headquarters. So taking yourself out to have an exotic experience and to learn new skills, it doesn't benefit you in the long run. And I think that's what many of the Japanese young kids have learned over many years of seeing what happens to the guy who comes back from England and he's got, a tailored blazer and he's wearing leather shoes and he just doesn't quite fit. And he doesn't laugh at the jokes the same way that we do. And his karaoke is not very great.
Yeah. Well, Timothy, there's only one exception, right? It's Mazda. In Ford, there was a term called Mazda gangs. Those Americans who were sent to Hiroshima to run Mazda when Ford still had a large equity share of Mazda.
Remember that well, yes.
And when they came back to Ford, they would become the CEO. It was like the Mazda experience in Hiroshima is helping these young executives to become the next CEO back home. So maybe that's the only exception. And the other things I want to ask is, when you say Malaysia's riot, are you talking about the 1969 riot, or is there another one that was?
Yes,
okay.
69.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so maybe we shouldn't be too optimistic about Kuala Lumpur's potential to become the next financial center.
I think they could make a good run for it, but I think if Tokyo really put its heart to it, it's the most logical choice. The reason why the two competitors are not so prominent is because of safety, because of family concerns. And in Japan, one of the wonderful things about this country is it is safe. It's a safe, clean city to live in. It is rule abiding. You can raise your family here. It's just a little bit difficult because the number of international schools and the language barrier, and also the infrastructure on dealing with repatriation of profits and the amount of taxation that is due to foreigners. These things probably could change if they put their heart to it in a 2-year time frame. The language ability, I think they could come to terms with that in pretty short order too. It's just I think that the Japanese are proud of their country, they're proud of their language, they're proud of their culture, and they don't feel the need to accommodate cultural invasion just in order to become a financial capital. It strikes me to be that kind of argument. I could be wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hiroko, good morning,
Hi.
and thank you very
Good
much for
morning,
coming up.
Timothy-san, Maya-san, Ren-san.
Good morning.
First of all, thank you for having me on the stage. Maya-san is not intimidating, I think.
Thank you.
I have to admit, though, that because of my English and because of my lack of knowledge on the Japanese politics, so that requires me a lot of guts to raise my hands.
Thank you.
But anyway, my question is, I'll be very quick. My question is Ukraine and Russian situation. You said that New Zealand and UK and US, Japan told their nationals to leave the country, and also mentioned about the huge big development of the incident. So does it suggest that Russia will most likely to invade or initiate an engagement soon?
Yes, that's exactly what it suggests. Yes.
Oh, okay. So despite the fact that the Olympics in Beijing is being held.
That's right. So you might remember this time last week, President Biden actually said, it's going to happen. If it happens, it's going to happen very quick. You need to be very careful. We're watching this very closely. He was criticized for kind of saber rattling. What do you even your conversation with the president of Ukraine, he said, back off, quit kind of agitating the story. But people are watching it very closely. They're watching, what the Russians are doing with the buildup on the border. And there does come a critical mass where you can begin to make predictions why you would, move troops that far in that number. It does indicate something. So people who are watching that and analyzing, and they have, better intelligence on what's going on the ground, for them to then convey their information to the State Department of their capital city, and the capital city government decides out of prudence to protect their State Department employees who are in the embassies. That's a huge deal. That's really a big deal. That is an indicator. That's like before a heart attack, you begin to lose your breath or you begin to get dizzy. Whether it actually happens or not, I'm watching very, very carefully. I'm on Twitter watching what the news is and what's happening there. But because they've also predicted that if it happens, it will be very fierce and very swift. So, yeah, it is a very delicate time.
Okay, so my second question is, if I may, is that how it impacts Japan, and what kind of expectation that U.S. and allied have from Japan?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you remember that during the Gulf War, Japan was called upon to facilitate the U.S. presence. So the Japanese Constitution restricts Japan from being offensive in nature. It's supposed to be only defensive, but it did contribute supply and support vessels for the United States initiative. And so that creeping facilitation of supporting U.S. initiatives puts Japan kind of in the crosshairs should something else happen. So with regard to Ukraine, the president of the United States has said, and he's been supported by the leaders of other EU countries, that retaliation will be swift, it will be economic, there will be sanctions. Nobody said anything about actually coming in with tanks and guns blaring, although the United States has sent U.S. troops to neighboring countries, not into Ukraine. Indicates that their allies will be called upon in the event of some incursion or some application of sanctions to join this party and also apply sanctions. So, the relationship between Russia and Japan is always tenuous. They would like to solve this issue. They'd like to sign the peace treaty. They'd like to make some sort of accommodation on the 4 Northern Territory islands. They would also like Japan to have a better sense of security with regard to the straits and the free flow of transportation, including Taiwan. But with this cohesion that is beginning to grow between Russia and China with regard to these trade flows, yeah, it can tumble out of control very quickly. It can escalate very quickly. We've got North Korea that's not quite embedded in that controversy, but they're looking for an angle to exert their influence and get some concessions there. So, yeah, it really opens up a can of worms. Should something like that happen, Japan would be called upon to participate and contribute. It's in the crosshairs. So, yes, if it becomes really hot and then it triggers China to move aggressively on Taiwan. China has already said in certain mouthpieces that they would like to see Japan suffer as a consequence and to resolve the issue that's been long-standing since the end of the war, and maybe seek the repatriations and the reparations that they deserve as a consequence of World War II. It just opens up too much.
Thank you. Because when Iraq invaded Kuwait, Kuwait showed their gratitude to those participated in the Allied, but not Japan, because the U.S. was show our flag, show your flag, and
yes,
so we had some kind of traumatizing from this history. So I was wondering what kind of support or assistance we can contribute.
Well, it's a great issue that you raise. So this push for revising the Constitution, it's not going to go away. The LDP is dedicated to reforming the Constitution and also acknowledging the self-defense forces and changing the name of the self-defense forces. The self-defense forces in its name tells you what it is. It's only for self-defense. And to change the Constitution so that it is more offensive, it can do first strike capabilities. Its alliance with the United States is far more robust. The military industry complex, which the Japanese don't really have as a very prominent part of the economy, could become more prominent. And I think the Japanese, with the technical application, they could do extremely well in highly advanced weaponry, but they haven't. Yes, it's something that requires an activant, and that activant is a incident or a situation where the Japanese people would say, if they were pressed, we want to change the Constitution so that we can protect ourselves better. And the lower house has voted on it and the upper house has voted on it. And now it's your turn. Please vote for this accommodation so that we can protect ourselves from North Korea or from China or from what's going on. It could happen very quickly. And I think the Japanese population would vote overwhelmingly in the event of that kind of activant, that kind of situation to change the Constitution. And once that, it hasn't happened. There has been not a period changed in the Constitution since it's been first established, 65 years. In any modern democracy, that's completely unique. To have a Constitution withstand time that long without any revision or amendment. So it's probably about time, but once you do that, it changes Japan. Japan no longer is unique in having that kind of a peace constitution, self-defense only, not aggression, to be, not to want to have a nuclear prospect ever again, and to be a spokesman for that throughout the world. So it would change Japan.
Thank you so much for your insight, and thank you, Maya-san. Thank you.
With this, I wish you a great day. Enjoy this beautiful Sunday, and we're looking forward to having you again here next Sunday.
Thank you, Maya.
Ren, Hiroko, thank you. This was Japan Expert Insights Room on Japanese politics. Thank you for coming and staying with us today. We will be on air next Sunday at 8:30 in the morning, Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and the role of Japan in the Indo-Pacific region. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, you can follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, we're looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and enjoy every day as much as possible. See you!